Hello, my name is Jackson Ransom, and today I'm here with
Ryan O'Connor.
And Ovella Huddleston.
In this video, we will be explaining TIP, the Transnational Index of Poverty. TIP measures poverty across all nations using three separate measurements: the Extreme Poverty Measurement, or EPM, the Multidimensional Poverty Index, or MPI, and the newly invented Measure of Relative Poverty, or MERP. It applies these measurements across all nations so you can see the poverty inside the nation and allows for a comparison across the world.
Before we can describe the ways to measure poverty, we must first understand what poverty is.
When people talk about poverty, there are two similar but distinct situations that they're trying to describe. First, when someone lacks their basic needs. This is when someone's survival is called in question. And second is to describe someone who has significantly less than the others around them. These are two different situations that have different requirements and needs. So we've come up with our own definition.
Poverty, in our definition, is a condition in which individuals or communities lack the necessary resources, opportunities, or capabilities necessary to thrive.
But Ryan, what does it mean to thrive?
Well, Vella, why don't you tell the classroom what it does mean to thrive?
Thriving means being able to be recognized, respected, and able to participate fully in society. Part of participating fully in society means being treated with dignity.
What we mean by dignity is at minimum having the resources necessary for a healthy, secure, and prolonged life.
So what is TIP? The Transnational Index of Poverty gives a country a score from 0 to 1, with 0 being no poverty and 1 being complete poverty. A country's index depends on a score on three different measurements: the EPM, or the Extreme Poverty Measure, the MPI, the Multidimensional Poverty Index, and the MERP, the Measure of Relative Poverty. That's a new creation. For countries in extreme poverty, TIP uses a combination of EPM and MPI to measure poverty. In an article by Max Roser, he says that extreme poverty is defined by the UN as living on less than $3 per person per day. On the other hand, the Global Multidimensional Poverty Index, or global MPI, is an annual international measure of acute multidimensional poverty, covering over 100 developing countries. It complements traditional monetary poverty measures by capturing the acute overlapping deprivations in health, education, and living standards that people in poverty face. This graphic shows the specific focuses of the MPI.
We define countries as in extreme poverty when 40% or more of the population is experiencing extreme poverty. We chose 40% and not 50% in order to include countries who may be just below the threshold of 50% but still have a large problem of poverty. Additionally, having the threshold at 40% accounts for countries' differing sizes. For example, in India, 44% of the population experiences extreme poverty. This equates to 616 million people. On the other hand, in a small country like the Central African Republic, 86% of the population experiences extreme poverty, which equates to much less than 660 million at 4.5 million people.
The metric shown is based on data gathered in 2024 and uses $3.65 per day per person as a threshold for poverty. So, if we were to use the threshold used by the EPM, $3 per day per person, there may be less countries on this list, as there would be less people below the poverty threshold.
The difference in the percentage of the population experiencing extreme poverty versus multidimensional poverty is an important tool in showing which countries need more economic support, as shown by the EPM, or more capability support, as shown by the MPI. Additionally, including both of these metrics ensures that countries that may be experiencing multidimensional poverty but not extreme poverty are included in the metric.
Now, we flip to the other side of this coin to examine poverty in more wealthy nations. More affluent countries have more economic prosperity, so in a way, the floor is raised for these experiences in comparison with those that we just analyzed.
Wait, but poverty in wealthy countries aren't even bad because they have even more stuff. Why measure it?
While that is true, that argument does not mean that the impoverished having access to resources places them into a position of thriving. For example, if an impoverished person has access to a refrigerator, that doesn't necessarily mean that they have access to resources that allow them to thrive. If, in a given situation, they don't have food or healthy foods to place in the refrigerator. So, what does poverty look like in wealthy nations? There are two key distinctions we look to define. Income inadequacy, which is when a population does not have enough income or resources to thrive, and income lowness, which is when there's a lack of resources or money to thrive. When we describe poverty in wealthy nations, we often consider it in the context of our own environment, but that ignores the fact that what we may consider inadequate in our environment may be better off in the context of other nations. Now, when poverty is at hand, this means you have less functionings, which means you have less capabilities, which is rooted in having less effective conversion factors.
Ryan, slow down, or I might have to give you a ticket, and I don't want to do that.
Founded by Amartya Sen, the capabilities approach says that real freedom is the ability to achieve doings and beings. This conceptualizes one's well-being through their capabilities and functionings.
Capabilities are the things that a person is able to do and be, while functionings are the actual beings and doings of a person. For instance, my capabilities are either to travel the world or to take a test. My functionings is a full-time student, so I will take the test.
We care about understanding people's well-being, and getting a proxy on their capabilities is a huge measure to better understand this. As such, we develop MERP, or Measure of Relative Poverty.
MERP seeks to measure people's capabilities using other measurements. It borrows heavily from America's Supplemental Poverty Measure, or SPM.
The SPM uses a consumption definition of poverty. It takes info on a family's annual pre-tax income and adds certain non- and near-cash benefits like food stamps and tax credits, and subtracts non-discretionary expenses like taxes.
For its threshold, the MERP uses the percentage of people's consumption. This includes food, clothing, shelter, and utilities.
The MERP is an international version of this, but with some key differences. It also finds a household's annual pre-tax income, but it uses it in two currencies, in the currency of that country and in purchasing power parity, or PPP. Also, for the SPM, the threshold is found using some value of food, clothing, shelter, and utilities, the spending of a household on those in a given period. However, for the MERP, to account for healthcare differences, they use food, clothing, shelter, utilities, and healthcare, whether that be in the form of payments, premiums, or taxes.
But wait, where does the MERP account for healthcare differences?
That's a good point. Some people don't have healthcare, some pay for it out of pocket, and others have to pay for it through their taxes. To account for this, we adjust the MERP from the SPM by finding the median consumption of a household on FCSU and healthcare. This accounts for a household who is too poor to afford healthcare versus a household who has to pay for it through their taxes.
In conclusion, we believe that the TIP, or the Transnational Index on Poverty, is the most effective way of measuring poverty due to the fact that it has an international way of determining poverty and simultaneously respects the dignity of every individual.
Thank you for watching.